So instead of covering a book or even a series, which will be the norm on Ink and Ammo, today we're going to talk about a subject. And we're going to do it in a couple mediums that will also not be normal for Ink and Ammo, but let's try something different today. So what happens when Western authors turn their eyes away from the more popular Western heroes of World War II and the known battles that have been dramatized by Hollywood over and over again, and instead focus on the more horrific, lesser known, but no less powerful stories that took place outside of the American and British heroes that we all know and have embraced? So let's take a look and let's kick in the door.
Then I'm your man.
Most people are aware of the Omaha and Normandy Beach D-Day invasion, Pegasus Bridge, Battle of the Bulge, Operation Market Garden, etc. of the Western Front of World War II, or even of the Pacific battles, Midway, Iwo Jima, Tarawa. Those have been popularized in Hollywood movies since the 50s. But lesser known is what happened on the Eastern Front. Yes, the Soviet Union was an ally of necessity, and as soon as World War II ended, the Cold War began. But that doesn't lessen what they did in context of World War II. Without the Soviet involvement on the Eastern Front, World War II may have dragged on for years longer, or may have even had a completely different end result. And while US and British forces suffered a combined loss of 1 million soldiers, which is a horrific number by anybody's account, Russia lost 27 million human lives in their defense of the Eastern Front against the German forces, while causing 4 million German casualties there. And some of the stories get lost because they weren't Western heroes. They weren't John Wayne in the Flying Leathernecks. They weren't part of D-Day. Doesn't mean those stories aren't amazing stories and don't deserve to be read. So today I want to look at some of the stories that came out of the Eastern Front. Like I said in the opening, we're actually going to discuss this in a couple of mediums that will not be normal to Ink and Ammo, but in this case it's very appropriate and I wanted to do something a little different. So we're going to do one of those mediums is graphic novels. So Garth Ennis is a well-known comic book writer, graphic novel writer, and he does a lot of material on war. And one of the things he specialized in was the Eastern Front. And in this case, I have, which I've recently read, is Johnny Red. This is a fantastic graphic novel which talks about a British pilot, Johnny Red, flying the British Hurricane along with Russian forces prior to the Battle of Stalingrad. This book has an incredible amount of action and a whole lot of Hurricane versus German 109s dogfights and art. It is absolutely fantastic and beautifully done. And not only is it incredibly attractive as far as its artwork, but the story was completely engaging. It's just absolutely fascinating. And a lot of what he does is all based on true stories. So even if the story is fiction, it is based around non-fiction events in the war. And it's absolutely fantastic. So this, like I said, follows Johnny Red, who is a legendary British pilot working with the Russians to help them against the Nazis. And it's definitely worth picking up. Now, if you're not a graphic novel fan, don't let that discourage you. These are war fiction done with art and done very well. So don't dismiss the fact of the medium and think it's just comic books, because it's more than that. Prior to that, he had done several pieces on the Night Witches. In case you don't know, the Night Witches were a group of female pilots that fought on the front lines of the Eastern Front for the Soviet Union, and they were given the worst equipment. The Soviets were so far outnumbered and having losses that were just astronomical that they had put plenty of females to work on the front lines in combat. And unfortunately, what they were flying were basically crop dusters and rickety old planes that could barely function, biplanes left over from World War I. And so they developed a technique of not getting shot down that is absolutely incredible. And these are outlined in these books. And this is why I'm saying do not dismiss that they're graphic novels, because these are more than worth your time. What the Night Witches did, because the attrition rate was so incredible and they were flying what they kept calling sewing machines, which was pretty appropriate, they would get up to a certain height above the German lines, turn off their engines, and just drop down on them with no sound. Drop their bombs, and then try to get the plane restarted so they could take back off. That is some brave women. And it is an amazing story. And that is a true story. Like I said, the attrition rate was absolutely incredible, where British and American pilots were becoming, known for how many planes they shot down with 50. The German pilots, the aces, were hitting hundreds, the numbers in the hundreds, because of how many Russian planes they were shooting down. There was a point when these German pilots were reporting back to headquarters, and their own generals, their own staff did not believe their numbers because they were just so outrageous. Because even this fascist government was questioning the numbers these pilots were bringing in. Normally they would be promoting this to the heavens, being like, look how powerful we are, look how strong we are, look at how many planes we've shot down against these lesser humans, kind of thing. That was not the case. The numbers were so outrageous that even the German staffs did not believe them. The numbers were getting up to, at one point, 400 planes a day that were being shot down over Russia. And that's why they put these women and these planes into circulation, because they didn't have any choice. So this is a collection, actually. This is Battlefields Volume 1, which has 3 different stories, including the original Night Witches story. So you can buy this separately, or you can buy a collection. And that covers the story of the Night Witches and their battles on the front lines as a unit. They were called Night Witches. The Germans came up with that name for them because they would strike at night in the dark with no sound because their engines were off. They only flew at night because it was too deadly for them to fly during the day, because they had no defense against the German pilots. None. I mean, they were flying crop dusters. And literally flying crop dusters that were just, they attached bombs and weapons to. So they decided to attack at night to lessen the chance of them being shot down by superior German equipment. The P-109s at the time were unbelievable and had no rival in the skies. So that's why they started flying at night and turning their engines off and basically running suicide runs on German front lines. So that was the first one, the Night Witches. So Garth Ennis went back to tap that storyline a little more, talking about one of the pilots that did survive the Night Witches and how she was integrated into the male units as a hero. And that was called Motherland. And this is it has its own story. This is in Battlefields Volume 2. And this tells the story of Lieutenant Anna Kharkova as she enters into this all-male unit as a hero of the Motherlands after having survived and, in fact, exceeded in the Night Witches with much lesser equipment. Another fantastic story. It's just amazing following these. The artwork is incredible. And, again, do not dismiss it because it is a graphic novel. These stories are stories that are really worth reading. They're kind of short, sure, and they do have pictures, but they're just absolutely fantastic. Garth Ennis is a superior writer, and the artists he gets on these are incredible. In this case, like I said, this is Motherland, and they pull no punches on the battles or on the art, and they're just absolutely brilliantly done, exciting. Johnny Red, Keith Burns does the art for. Night Witches is Russ Braun, and for Motherland is also Russ Braun doing the art. And speaking of Night Witches, you might have seen me wearing a headscarf in a couple of videos. That headscarf is actually from Sabaton, and it's actually about their song Night Witches. So that's where that came from, and that's what I'm wearing. If you've ever wondered, that also touches on that same subject, so I thought I'd show you. So Garth Ennis actually wrote something else on the Eastern Front, and that was his story, Sarah. And this is with Steve Epting doing the art. And Sarah is based off another true story that came out of the Eastern Front, which involved the female sniper crews that had worked and fought alongside the Russian soldiers against the invading army during and before the Battle of Stalingrad. And this is, like I said, based on a true story. And he just did a fantastic job with it. The art is brutal and incredible, and the story is just absolutely fascinating. And yes, again, it's a graphic novel, but it is definitely worth reading. It is just a fantastic story, and it follows one particular sniper, Sarah, as she goes through her training and through the seasons and time with the Sniper Corps. It is absolutely fascinating reading. It's brilliant, and like I said, based on true stories, you get a real feel for what they went through, and it definitely should not be dismissed. Again, just because it's a graphic novel, the stories that you get out of such a small time investment is absolutely worth it. Pound for pound, these stories are definitely worth your time. If you're interested in World War II, if you're interested in finding more about the Eastern Front and reading some great war stories, these are definitely it. So I picked up Occupied Pulp, which is a collection of short stories revolving around wartime occupation of different countries at different time periods. But I want to talk about one story in particular that's relevant to this discussion, which is Bobby Nash's Last Flight of the Night Witch. And this particular story follows a night witch after she is shot down and has to escape from a prisoner of war camp and what she does after the war. And it is an absolutely fascinating story. It's so well done, so professionally written. It's hard to believe that Bobby Nash doesn't have a bigger following. He has a series out there called Snow that I'm going to read now, and some other short stories and things out there. So Bobby Nash, author worth checking out if you want an independent, lesser-known author. Just throwing that out there. But the story is absolutely fantastic. And this one particular story does follow a night witch, so it does connect back to some of these other stories. And I don't get bored of those stories. Even though they keep being visited, there's so many stories to tell inside that world that it's nice to see different takes. And none of them contradict each other. All of them have apparently done the research to know what they're talking about. And it's just really good stuff. So Bobby Nash's The Last Flight of the Night Witch is another piece worth checking out if you're interested in the subject matter. Now, as I had talked about Sarah and the female sniper crew that worked on the front line against the Nazis, that will lead me to Enemy at the Gates. Now, there's a movie out there that you might have seen called Enemy at the Gates, and I found it to be a really good movie, but the story in it is actually based on a true story, and it's taken from the book Enemy at the Gates. But it's only one tiny fragment of that book. They took one story out of that book and turned it into a movie. Enemy at the Gates is a non-fiction book about the Eastern Front. It is fantastically written. And one of the things that's talked about in regards to Enemy at the Gates, the book by William Craig, is how it's told. This is a non-fiction historical snapshot that tells a story of what happened at the Eastern Front. But it doesn't feel that way. His writing is so well done that it feels like you're reading a fictional story about these people. It's so accessible and easy to read that you don't feel like you're reading a dry history at all. You feel like you're invested in these people and these characters. And there's a reason it has such a high rating on Goodreads. It is easy to read. It's a fantastic story. It's completely engaging, but it's also completely brutal, as he does tell the truth about what happened during that time. And some of those stories, some of the anecdotes, some of the moments in that story are just completely, overwhelmingly terrible and brutal. Just know that going in, and getting to see that part of World War II, which we don't often get to see, which isn't put on film or popularized in Western culture the way some of our other events like D-Day are, is important. It's really important to see that side. Not only is it important, but it's really interesting. It is completely engaging and 100% worth your time. So yeah, if you're interested in finding out more about the Eastern Front, then Garth Ennis's graphic novels are fantastic and fun and beautiful way to spend some time learning about that world and being entertained. That Bobby Nash story, Highly recommend it. Check it out. And if you're interested in a more nonfiction approach to these stories, check out Enemy at the Gates. While it will entertain you, it's also very informative and will give you a true picture of what it was like on the Eastern Front around the time of the Battle of Stalingrad. There are other options as well. Here's a story you might want to look into. This is Pavlov's House. This is a board game, not a book, but if you want to learn more about what was happening during the Battle of Stalingrad and on the Eastern Front, then checking into some stories around Pavlov's House would be a good way to do it, which will bring me to redeployment. Now, obviously, this is a true story, so redeployment here is easy. Not only can you, if you're interested, go back in and read other stuff by Garth Ennis. He's out there. He is a very prolific writer in the graphic novel universe. He has many, many war stories if you're interested. He's also the writer, in case you didn't know, of the Preacher series and The Boys, which now has a very famous TV show on Amazon, in case you haven't seen it. Yep, that's him. The Preacher had a TV series as well. So he is well regarded, and his stuff is definitely worth reading. Bobby Nash, like I said, he has some other work out there, particularly a series of books that you can get through Kindle Unlimited for free called Snow. And if you're looking for more nonfiction about the Eastern Front, there is plenty of it out there. I encourage you to go look it up because it's very interesting and it shows a side of World War II that isn't quite as shown, isn't quite as popular, isn't quite as known in the Western Hemisphere. So definitely check all those things out. So if you wanted me to give you a rating, by the way, this is a varied stack of material, but I'm going to tell you right off, there's not one thing I've talked about that was below a 4-star. Every one of them is high quality and worth your time, and I highly suggest you pick it up. Not one single piece that I mentioned today has been below a 4-star minimum. So yeah, if this subject matter interests you, and I won't do a lot of videos revolving around a subject on Ink and Ammo, but I thought this one was appropriate and could work, and I hope it did. I hope you got something out of it. I hope you had fun. I hope you'll come back and see me on Ink and Ammo and everything else I'm going to do on the channel, and have a good one.